Ever wondered how a tub of Ben & Jerry's goes from dairy to pure dessert chaos? Like, how do they get entire brownies, cookie dough chunks, and caramel swirls into one scoop without turning it into soup? It's not just mixing and freezing. There's a whole factory dance behind it. And once you see how it's actually done, you'll never look at a pint the same way again. Before we get to the cookie dough chunks or caramel swirls, everything starts with one sacred formula, the base mix. This is the lifeblood of every pint, the blank canvas behind every wild Ben & Jerry's creation. And it's surprisingly simple. Kind of. At its core, the base mix is just fresh cream, condensed skim milk, liquid sugar, and egg yolks. But the quality of those ingredients? Off the charts. The cream usually comes from nearby Vermont farms that are part of Ben & Jerry's Caring Dairy program, meaning the cows are raised with high welfare standards and minimal stress. Happy cows, happy cream. The ingredients are pumped into giant stainless steel tanks, each one holding hundreds of gallons. And the goal here isn't just to mix them, it's to pasteurize the entire batch safely and consistently without wrecking the flavor or texture. So how do they do that? Heat. A lot of heat. The mixture is piped through a heat exchanger system that takes it to around 180 degrees Fahrenheit, 82 degrees Celsius, for about 25 seconds. This zaps any bacteria, preserves shelf life, and sets the base for a clean, safe product. But right after heating, it's cooled immediately, like within seconds, down to about 38 degrees Fahrenheit. That rapid cool down helps protect the fat structure, which is essential for that velvety, scoopable mouthfeel. Then it's pumped into aging tanks, where it chills for up to 8 hours. Why wait? Because this downtime allows the fat to crystallize slightly and the proteins to fully hydrate, thickening the mix into something richer and creamier. Think of it as marinating, but for ice cream. This creamy base doesn't taste like much on its own. Slightly sweet, a little buttery, but that's the point. It's not supposed to wow you yet, because the party starts in the next step. Okay, now we're talking. This is where the Ben & Jerry's identity kicks in. After aging, the base mix flows into the flavor tanks, basically high-capacity blenders that bring the soul of each ice cream to life. Depending on the recipe, different ingredients get pumped, poured, or dropped in. Cocoa powder for chocolate fudge brownie, peppermint extract for mint chocolate cookie, brown sugar and molasses for that brown buttery swirl in something like cinnamon buns. And everything is precision dosed down to the gram. No eyeballing, no shortcuts. Once the flavors are incorporated, it's not just a base anymore. It's a full-on personality. And Ben & Jerry's doesn't do boring. These flavor bases aren't just sweet. They've got character. Some are thick and rich. Others are smooth and airy. And because every batch is built for a specific pint, there are dozens of flavor tanks operating in tandem. But it doesn't stop at taste. Some of these tanks also prep for texture. For instance, if the flavor calls for swirls, caramel, fudge, peanut butter, there are separate swirl tanks that keep those mix-ins warm, pourable, and ready to inject later on without clumping or freezing. It's basically a flavor orchestra. And the conductors? Data systems that monitor every parameter: viscosity, temperature, sugar ratios. So no pint ends up tasting like a knockoff. Once everything checks out, the liquid gold heads to one of the most mind-blowing steps in the process, freezing it without turning it into a brick. Here's where it gets really fun. The mix is finally ready for its glow-up. From sweet slurry to actual spoon-ready ice cream. But making that transition is way more complicated than just putting it in a freezer. Enter the dynamic freezer, a beast of a machine that freezes the mix while whipping it full of air. Yup, air. You probably didn't expect that one, but it's crucial. Ice cream without air? That's just frozen fudge. Dense, chewy, and not scoopable. The air, called overrun in the biz, gives ice cream its lightness and melt-on-the-tongue feel. Ben & Jerry's typically uses a lower overrun than mass-market brands. That means their ice cream is denser and creamier, which you already know if you've ever tried to scoop out a frozen pint, like half-baked, without bending a spoon. The dynamic freezer pulls the mix from the flavor tank and pumps it through a rotating barrel surrounded by freezing coils. Liquid ammonia chills the coils to sub-zero temps, freezing the mix instantly as it spins. Blades inside the barrel scrape the sides to keep crystals small and texture smooth, basically creating that silky consistency in real time. And here's the kicker. All this happens in seconds. But it's still not quite finished. At this point, it's soft serve texture. Perfect for the next step, mix-ins. Because this is Ben & Jerry's. You didn't think they'd forget the cookie dough, did you? This is the part that separates Ben & Jerry's from, well, almost everyone. You've got your creamy base. It's perfectly chilled, smooth as silk. And then, chaos. Controlled chaos. It's time to throw in the good stuff. Think of this stage like the moment you dump chocolate chips into cookie dough. Except instead of a spoon, you're using high-capacity augers and chunk feeders that can handle literal tons of mix-ins. Cookie dough chunks, brownies, peanut butter cups, pretzels, marshmallow swirls. Every Ben & Jerry's pint has a signature combo. And these combos? They don't go in randomly. There's a science to the chunk. Every add-in has to be distributed evenly. Not just for taste, but for texture. You want to hit that cookie dough on your third bite, not just the last. So the factory uses what they call chunk pumps. Rotating feeders that drop a specific quantity of mix-ins into the flowing stream of ice cream as it exits the dynamic freezer. And get this, the timing has to be split-second accurate. If the chunks hit too early, they get smashed or swirl weirdly. Too late and they won't blend evenly. So the whole process is synced with motion sensors and flow meters that watch every pint worth of ice cream moving through the system. Then there are the swirls, caramel, fudge, fruit sauces, that get injected with swirling arms that look like metallic spaghetti twirlers. They don't just stir them in randomly, they ribbon them in, like marbling a cake. That's why your Cherry Garcia has those long, satisfying fudge trails running through the middle, not just some sad chocolate puddle in one corner. By now, the mix is almost done. It's creamy, chunky, textured, and freezing cold. But it still needs one more thing to officially become a pint of Ben & Jerry's. A home. You ever notice how Ben & Jerry's pints feel heavier than other ice creams? That's not your imagination, it's because they are. Once the ice cream is fully mixed, it's piped straight into pre-chilled pint containers. And when I say chilled, I mean it. These containers sit in a freezing tunnel that keeps them below -20 degrees Fahrenheit, so the product doesn't melt during filling. Each pint is filled by weight, not just volume. That's key, because those chunks and swirls can vary from one scoop to another. The machine uses high-speed scales to make sure every pint hits that perfect sweet spot, 473 milliliters and no shortcuts. The machine pauses between each fill for just milliseconds. That's enough time for a sensor to confirm the container is correctly positioned, clean, and sealed the moment it's full. The lid drops on automatically, and just like that, you've got what looks like a finished product. Except it's not done chilling yet. That soft serve texture from the dynamic freezer, it's still not hard enough to ship. So next stop, the deep freeze. Here's the final transformation. After the pints are sealed, they head into what's called a hardening tunnel, a frozen labyrinth colder than a Vermont winter. We're talking -40 degrees Fahrenheit, give or take. Inside, high-powered fans blast freezing air over the pints as they ride slowly through the tunnel on a massive conveyor system. This stage usually takes about 2 to 3 hours, depending on the factory and the batch size. It's not quick, but it's absolutely critical. Why? Because the slower the freeze, the larger the ice crystals. And larger ice crystals means gritty, icy ice cream. Not good. The hardening tunnel drops the internal temperature of each pint so quickly that ice crystals don't even have time to grow. What you're left with is a creamy, dense, perfectly scoopable texture that'll hold up in your freezer for weeks without turning into freezer burn sadness. Once they exit the tunnel, pints are scanned for final inspection. Labels are checked, seals are double verified, batch numbers are logged, and a random pint from every batch is pulled for internal quality testing. Taste tests, texture checks, spoon tests. They even analyze chunk distribution. Only when everything checks out does the pint head to the last stop: packing, shipping, and, hopefully, your spoon. Just when you think you've seen the full process, bam! Ben & Jerry throws in a curveball. Limited editions, collabs, flavors that sound more like desserts your grandma warned you about. Netflix and chilled, fish food, the Tonight Dough. These aren't churned out like your average vanilla. These special pints go through custom production runs, new mix-ins, new flavor bases, and sometimes totally different prep methods. Like a swirl that's piped into 2 different directions or a crunchy core that has to stay separate until packaging. It's a logistical nightmare, and they love it. Flavor testing, small batch pilots, consumer panels. There's a whole R&D kitchen behind every weirdly perfect pint. And yes, someone's actual job is to taste test brownie batter swirl at 9 a.m. We salute them. So yeah, turns out that pint in your freezer, it's kind of a masterpiece. A cold, creamy engineered to the gram masterpiece. From Vermont cows to Mixin mayhem to freezers colder than your ex's heart. Every bite is built like a symphony. And the best part? Somewhere, right now, a brand new flavor is being dreamed up. Maybe it's better. Maybe it's weirder. Maybe it's both. All we know is, the next time you pop that lid, you're not just scooping ice cream, you're scooping a story. And it's not over yet.